They called it the house that never slept. It was always awake, whether it was the soft hum of sewing machines at midnight or the rhythmic tapping of a typewriter echoing at dawn. This was where the Jamal family lived, 5 cramped into 2 rooms, where love had to stretch thin but somehow always managed to hold firm. Yet, there was a time when people said the family wouldn't make it, not with how little they had. Today, the Jamal children are the pride of their community, each carving a path brighter than anyone could have imagined. But success, for them, was not born from miracles. It was built on quiet sacrifices and an unyielding belief in the impossible. When the Jamal family moved to the city, they brought almost nothing but their dreams. Yusuf Jamal, the father, worked as a mechanic at a rundown garage. His hands were always covered in grease, and his pay was barely enough to keep food on the table. Maryam Jamal, the mother, took up tailoring in the evenings, stitching clothes for neighbors and strangers. Their home was noisy, not with arguments but with industry. Aisha, the eldest daughter, would read aloud from borrowed school books while Maryam sewed, her voice steady even when exhaustion tried to silence her. Ibrahim, the middle child, collected scraps of wire and old radios, trying to make sense of the pieces while Yusuf nodded in quiet approval. Little Zainab, too young to walk but old enough to notice, often danced to the rhythm of her siblings' efforts, her tiny feet a joyful rebellion against the weight of poverty. But then came the eviction notice. The rent had been raised, and Yusuf's meager earnings couldn't keep up. They had 2 months to live, but nowhere to go. Maryam wept quietly into her sewing, thinking of the children and the life they might lose. The night the eviction notice arrived, Aisha stayed awake long after everyone else had gone to bed. The next morning, she announced she had a plan. She gathered the neighbors, those who knew Maryam's teaching skills and Yusuf's reputation as a fair mechanic. Aisha, only 16, proposed something audacious, a fundraiser. They would host a small community bazaar, selling Maryam's clothes, Yusuf's refurbished tools, and Ibrahim's tiny gadgets made from the scraps he tinkered with. It was a desperate gamble, but the neighborhood rallied. Over 2 weekends, they managed to raise enough to pay the overdue rent. For the first time in months, the Jamals breathed a little easier. That small victory ignited something in the family. Aisha poured herself into her studies, determined to earn a scholarship. Ibrahim, now more confident in his skills, started fixing small electronics for neighbors. Zainab, though still young, began helping Maryam with simple stitching tasks, learning the craft. Years passed, each one harder than the last, but the family never stopped working. Aisha became the first in her family to attend university, studying law on a full scholarship. Ibrahim built a small business repairing electronics, eventually branching into programming. Zainab, inspired by her mother's artistry, became a designer, turning Maryam's simple patterns into something elegant and sought after. Through it all, Yusuf and Maryam kept the house running, their pride growing with each milestone their children achieved. Today, the Jamal children have transformed their family story. Aisha is a human rights lawyer, fighting for families like her own. Ibrahim runs a tech startup that develops affordable tools for rural communities. Zainab is a celebrated fashion designer, her work showcased in cities far beyond the one they once struggled in. The house that once seemed too small for their dreams is now a cherished memory. Though they've moved to bigger homes, they still gather every Friday night at their parents' old table, sharing laughter, stories, and gratitude for the life they've built together. And the house, it still doesn't sleep. Not because of struggle anymore, but because of joy. The Jamal family's Friday gatherings were nothing short of legendary in the neighborhood. The tiny house that once seemed to sag under the weight of their struggles now overflowed with warmth, laughter, and the scent of Maryam's famous spiced rice and Yusuf's grilled lamb, a recipe he'd perfected over the years. The neighbors often peeked over the fence, smiling at the sight of Zainab rolling up her sleeves to help her mother in the kitchen, or Ibrahim chasing after his nieces and nephews with a toy drone he'd built. Aisha, ever the storyteller, would regale everyone with tales from her courtroom battles, her voice commanding as ever but now tinged with a confidence earned through years of fighting for others. The family had grown. Aisha's husband, a journalist, fit right into the rhythm of their lively conversations. Ibrahim, still single but always promising to bring someone special next time, was the favorite uncle, spoiling the little ones with gifts and gadgets. Zainab, ever the perfectionist, had brought her fiancé, a quiet architect who admired her fierce independence as much as her talent. Despite their individual successes, the Jamal children never forgot the sacrifices that had paved their way. They put their resources to renovate the old house, transforming it into a community center. It now housed a library, a sewing workshop, and a small tech lab, all free for the neighborhood children and adults to use. Miriam was the heart of the sewing workshop, teaching young women the skills that had once kept her family afloat. She often said, "Every stitch is a chance to mend something, whether it's fabric or a life." Yusuf, though retired from the garage, spent his days teaching boys and girls how to fix bikes and tools, his grease-stained hands now symbols of resilience and skill. The neighborhood had changed because of them. Children who once wandered aimlessly now filled the center, eager to learn. Young mothers who had once struggled in silence now found a support system in Miriam's workshop. And at the heart of it all was the family that had once been told they wouldn't make it. One Friday, as the family gathered around the table, Yusuf looked at his children with misty eyes. "You've made us so proud," he said, his voice breaking. "Not just because of what you've accomplished, but because of how you've given back. This house, it carries all our struggles, all our dreams. And now, it carries hope for so many others." The room grew quiet for a moment, each person reflecting on the journey that had brought them there. Then Zainab, ever the spark, raised her glass. "To the house that never slept," she said with a smile. "To the house that never slept," the family echoed, their voices loud and joyful. And as they clinked their glasses, the walls of the old house seemed to hum in agreement, alive with the echoes of a family's love, determination, and unwavering belief in each other. The house had never needed rest, because it had always been fueled by something far more enduring, the boundless power of hope. The transformation of the Jamal house into a community center wasn't just a symbol of the family's journey, it was the beginning of something bigger. The children, now leaders in their respective fields, decided to take their family's mission beyond their neighborhood. One evening, after their usual Friday gathering, Aisha brought up an idea. "We've seen what can happen when people are given tools and opportunities. What if we create something larger, something that can help other families like ours across the country?" Ibrahim, ever the problem solver, was the first to jump in. "We could build centers in other cities. Each one can focus on what we know best: technology, fashion, and advocacy." Zainab, sipping her tea, nodded thoughtfully. "But it has to feel personal. People don't just need resources, they need to know someone believes in them." And so, the Jamal Foundation for Empowerment was born. The family pooled their savings, sought funding from supporters, and worked tirelessly to bring their vision to life. The first expansion was modest, a center in a small rural town where Ibrahim's tech lab introduced students to coding and engineering. Zainab designed programs to teach women how to start their own businesses, whether through tailoring or crafting. Aisha's legal team offered free workshops on rights and opportunities, ensuring families wouldn't have to navigate life's challenges alone. Word spread quickly. What started as one center became 5, then 10, as communities rallied behind the initiative. People were drawn not just by the resources, but by the story of the Jamals, a family that had risen from the depth of hardship and chosen to lift others along the way. Miriam and Yusuf, though now in their later years, traveled to every new center's opening. Miriam would always give a speech, her voice soft but firm. We didn't have much when we started, but we had love, faith, and the belief that hard work could change everything. We hope these walls carry that same spirit. Yusuf, a man of few words, would usually just smile and say, "If I could fix it, you can too." Years passed, and the Jamal children began to reflect on their own growing families. Aisha's eldest daughter, Amira, had started university, studying international relations. Ibrahim's twin sons were already following in his footsteps, dismantling and rebuilding anything they could get their hands on. Zainab's youngest, a bubbly 6-year-old, loved to play dress-up in her mother's designs, declaring she would be a designer too. On one particularly warm Friday evening, the family gathered again, this time at the first community center they had built. The space was alive with activity, children learning, women sewing, and young men tinkering with electronics. Miriam, sitting in the corner with Yusuf, watched her grandchildren running through the halls. "This is everything we dreamed of," she said quietly. Yusuf nodded, his hand resting over hers. "And more. Much more." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and orange, the Jamal family stood together, their shadows long but their impact immeasurable. Their story, once defined by struggle, had become a beacon of hope for countless others. And though their successes had taken them far from that tiny, noisy house, they carried its lessons and love wherever they went. The house may have been small, but the dreams it nurtured were boundless. And even now, as it stood proudly as a community center, it remained awake, alive with the sound of dreams being born.